What if I told you that in one of Asia's most mysterious countries, you could live an entire month on just $500 and still feel richer than ever? Sounds insane, right? Because in the United States, $500 might not even cover a week's rent. In London, it might buy you a couple of grocery runs. But in Myanmar, that same $500 stretches into rent, meals, transport, and yes, even a few luxuries you'd never expect. But here's the twist: Myanmar isn't just about affordability. Beneath the golden pagodas and bustling tea shops lies a world of traditions outsiders rarely see. Unusual laws that can leave you speechless, and a daily life that feels half timeless, half unpredictable. This is a place where monks scroll on smartphones. Street vendors serve full meals for less than $2. And entire communities pause to celebrate festivals that look like pure chaos, but in the best way possible. Some say Myanmar is frozen in time, trapped in its past. Others insist it's racing forward faster than most people realize. But the truth is far stranger, more surprising, and way more human than any tourist brochure will ever tell you. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly whether Myanmar is a hidden paradise, a dangerous trap, or something far more complicated in between. Myanmar, also known as Burma, is one of those countries that often gets overlooked on the map. Yet it sits at the heart of Southeast Asia, surrounded by some of the most influential nations in the region. To the west, it touches India and Bangladesh. To the north, it meets the giant China. On the east, there's Laos and Thailand, countries that are already hotspots for travelers. So, Myanmar is right there in the middle, sharing borders with 5 countries, and yet it feels like a world of its own. This location gives it a mix of influences, but it has also allowed it to develop a culture that feels untouched and original. The first thing that strikes you about Myanmar is the contrast between its natural beauty and its man-made wonders. You see endless rice fields stretching across the countryside, golden pagodas shining under the sun, and villages that look like time slowed down decades ago. The Irrawaddy River, which cuts through the heart of the country, is more than just a waterway, it's life itself. Boats carry everything from food to furniture, and watching people live by the river feels like you've opened a window into another rhythm of life. Then there's Yangon, the largest city, which feels like chaos and calm wrapped together. When I first landed there, it was as if I had stepped into a different timeline. Colonial-era buildings stood side by side with brand new malls, while tea stalls line almost every street corner. And then, of course, the monks in their bright orange robes walking calmly through the rush of traffic, as if the honking horns, roaring buses, and motorcycles were just background noise. The energy is wild, but there's also something strangely peaceful about it. Speaking of traffic, Yangon deserves a whole story of its own. If you think driving in your city is stressful, try crossing the road here. Imagine a video game with no reset button: cars, buses, bikes, and pedestrians all moving at once, with little sense of lanes or timing. Somehow, it works. Somehow, everyone weaves in and out without complete chaos. And while you're standing there, thinking there's no way you'll make it across alive, a group of school kids casually walks past you as if nothing's happening. That's when you realize this is normal here, and you're the one who looks out of place. Outside the city, Myanmar feels almost like a living museum. One of the most surreal places is Bagan, a plain covered with thousands of temples and pagodas. When you see it for the first time, it's hard to process. Imagine an entire landscape dotted with golden and brick-colored spires, stretching as far as your eyes can see. Some are massive and grand, others small and hidden, almost forgotten. And the best part, they aren't locked away behind barriers. You can walk into many of them, touch the walls, and feel history carved into every surface. This isn't the polished, tourist-perfect vibe of other countries, it's raw and real. And that's what makes it so special. But Myanmar isn't just temples and rivers. The countryside has its own rhythm. Villages built with bamboo houses sit next to green rice paddies. Farmers still use water buffalo to plow the fields, and kids laugh while running barefoot along dusty paths. At times, it feels like stepping back into an earlier century where life is simple, connected to the land, and lived at a slower pace, and yet, at the same time, you'll see someone pull out a smartphone or a motorbike zipping past, reminding you that time here isn't frozen, it's just moving differently. The mix of old and new is everywhere. In Yangon, you can walk past a 100-year-old colonial building that's crumbling, and right next to it, there's a shiny new cafe with Wi-Fi and lattes. In Mandalay, you'll find motorbike taxis swarming the streets, but in the next moment, you'll stumble across a quiet monastery where monks are chanting in silence. That's Myanmar in a nutshell, contradictions that somehow fit together. And here's the part that really makes you stop and think: the cost of living. While you're standing in front of a golden pagoda that looks priceless, you suddenly realize how affordable life here can be. A simple, filling meal costs less than $2, and a hot cup of milk tea is only a few cents. The same $1 that feels useless in many countries turns into something valuable here. It buys you food, transport, or a seat at a tea shop where you can watch life unfold around you. That's the magic of Myanmar. Every dollar stretches further, but every experience feels richer. So, while the world may know Myanmar for its history, its politics, or its challenges, the first impression when you actually land here is something very different. Its color, chaos, kindness, and contrast. It's a country that feels both ancient and alive at the same time. And just when you think you've figured it out, it throws you another surprise. But wait until you hear what $1 can really get you here. That's where things start getting unbelievable. When people first hear that you can live in Myanmar for just $500 a month, they usually laugh. They think it's impossible. But once you actually see the breakdown, it not only makes sense, it shocks you at how much value you get for so little. Back home, $500 might cover rent for a single room or maybe a week's worth of groceries. In Myanmar, it covers almost everything: your rent, your food, your transport, your daily tea shop habits, and even a bit of fun on the weekends. The real surprise is not just how cheap things are, but how much you can actually live, not just survive, on this budget. Let's start with rent. If you're looking for a local-style apartment, you can find one for about $150 to $250 a month. For that price, you get a clean room, usually furnished, often with a fan or even air conditioning if you stretch toward the higher end. It won't be a luxury penthouse, but it's decent, and in many cases, it's bigger than the showbox apartments you find in big cities around the world. If you're in Yangon or Mandalay, the price might be closer to $250, but in smaller towns, you can easily go lower. Compare this to places like Thailand or Vietnam, where even the cheapest apartments in tourist areas often go for $300 or more. And suddenly you realize Myanmar gives you far more space for far less. Now, the fun part: food. Myanmar's food scene is not just delicious, it's incredibly affordable. A simple local meal: rice, curry, vegetables, maybe even fish costs around $2 to $3. That means if you eat out every single day, you're still only spending about $90 on food for the whole month. And we're not talking about boring meals. Burmese curries are rich, spicy, and usually come with side dishes, soups, and endless refills of rice. For breakfast, you can grab mohinga, the national dish, which is a fish noodle soup, for less than $1. Street snacks like samosas, fritters, and skewers are often just a few cents each. To put it in perspective, in the United States, $2 gets you a bottle of water at the airport. In Myanmar, it feeds you. That alone shows how far your dollar stretches here. And then there's the tea culture. Tea shops are the heartbeat of Myanmar. People don't just go there to drink tea, they go to chat, debate politics, gossip, and spend hours watching the world go by. A sweet cup of milk tea costs around 20 cents, sometimes less. For the price of one Starbucks latte back home, you could practically sit in a tea shop every day for a month and still have money left over. And the tea isn't the only thing. Most shops serve small snacks or meals too, turning a casual drink into a mini feast. It is the kind of place where your $500 not only buys you food and drink, but also buys you a front row seat to the culture itself. Transportation is another area where Myanmar feels almost too cheap to be real. Taxis, motorbike rides, and buses rarely cost more than a couple of dollars. In Yangon, they even have Grab, the Southeast Asian version of Uber, and you can take a ride across town for less than what you'd pay for a Starbucks coffee in New York. Motorbike taxis in Mandalay are even cheaper. You can hop on the back for a short ride for under $1. Compare that to the Philippines or Thailand, where short taxi rides can still eat up $5 to $10 easily. And you start to see how Myanmar allows your money to stretch like elastic. Entertainment and lifestyle also fit comfortably into the $500 budget. Internet cafes are common, especially in smaller towns, and they charge only cents per hour. Street food is everywhere, from fried noodles to grilled meat skewers. And you can snack your way through a night market for under $5. If you're really into nightlife, Yangon and Mandalay have bars and clubs where drinks are a fraction of what they cost in Bangkok. Or Ho Chi Minh City, a cold local beer, about $1. Imported beer or cocktails, maybe $2 or $3. Try getting that in Thailand or Vietnam, where nightlife prices are steadily climbing thanks to tourism. One of the best parts of living on $500 in Myanmar is that it doesn't feel like scraping by. You're not just pinching every penny, you're genuinely living well by local standards. You can rent a place with space, eat out every day, drink endless cups of tea, take taxis instead of buses if you want comfort, and still have some money left for fun. It's not luxury living, but it's comfortable, and it gives you access to experiences you can put a price. Unlike watching the sunset over Bagan's temples or joining locals at a tea shop for an evening of laughter and chatter. And let's not forget the hidden luxuries. For example, getting a massage in Myanmar can cost around $6 to $10 for a full hour. Compare that to Western prices of $60 or more, and it feels like you've hit the jackpot. Even haircuts, laundry, and small services are affordable things that would eat into your budget quickly in other countries. To put things in perspective, let's do a quick comparison. In Thailand, most travelers agree you need at least $800 to live decently in Bangkok. In Vietnam, you can survive on $600 to $700 a month in places like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. But your comfort level depends on your lifestyle. In the Philippines, $500 might cover the basics in rural towns, but in Manila or Cebu, it disappears fast. Myanmar, on the other hand, still stands out as one of the few places where $500 is not just survival money. It actually gives you breathing room, and that's what makes it exciting. Back home, $500 might only buy you a week of groceries, a month of gas, or just one utility bill. In Myanmar, that same $500 buys you an entire month of rice, curries, transport, snacks, tea, and enough caffeine to fuel an army. It buys you freedom from constant financial stress. It buys you experiences and memories that no expensive city apartment or overpriced latte could ever replace. So yes, $500 in Myanmar doesn't just stretch, it transforms. And once you realize how much it covers, you start asking yourself, if I can live so comfortably here for so little, why am I paying so much back home? One of the first things you notice when you arrive in Myanmar is not the buildings, not the food, not even the temples, it's the people. The warmth and hospitality of the Burmese people hit you immediately. Even if you don't speak the language, you'll find yourself welcomed with smiles, small gestures, and often curious questions. Strangers invite you for tea, neighbors share food, and people go out of their way to help without expecting anything in return. It feels very different from big cities where everyone is in a hurry. Here, people genuinely make time for one another. What makes it even more fascinating is how much kindness exists in a country that, by global standards, doesn't have great material wealth. People live simply, many working as farmers, vendors, or small shop owners, yet their generosity often puts wealthier nations to shame. They may have less money, but they treat strangers with more kindness than most millionaires. There's something humbling about being offered food by a family who has very little, yet insists you sit and eat with them. Religion plays a big role in shaping this culture of generosity. About 90% of the population in Myanmar follows Buddhism, and you see its influence everywhere. Monks in their deep orange robes are part of daily life. They walk barefoot in the mornings to collect offerings. They sit in tea shops sipping quietly. And they bless homes, businesses, and even gadgets. I once joked that Myanmar is the only place where monks use iPhones and bless your Wi-Fi router before you connect. It sounds funny, but it captures the reality here, the ancient and the modern mix so naturally that it becomes part of the daily rhythm. Buddhism in Myanmar isn't just about rituals, it's about a way of life. The idea of merit, doing good deeds to build spiritual credit, runs deep. That's why you see so many people giving food to monks or donating to temples. For locals, generosity is more than good manners. It's part of their spiritual journey, and that generosity spills over to how they treat foreigners too. Even when people don't have much, they believe in sharing, because kindness here is seen as wealth in itself. Then come the quirks, the small things that make Burmese culture unique. One of the most noticeable is thanaka, a yellowish paste made from ground bark that people apply to their faces. At first, you might think it's makeup or sunscreen, but it's actually both. It cools the skin, protects against the sun, and also has cosmetic value. You'll see children, women, and even men wearing it in all sorts of patterned circles on the cheeks, stripes across the forehead, or full-on artistic designs. It's beautiful and practical at the same time. And once you spend a few days here, it feels completely normal to walk around surrounded by smiling faces painted with thanaka. Another everyday quirk is betel nut chewing. You'll notice many locals with red-stained lips and teeth, which comes from chewing small parcels of betel nut wrapped in a leaf with lime paste. It acts as a mild stimulant, like drinking strong coffee, and for many, it's a daily habit. The downside is the red spit marks on the sidewalks, which can shock newcomers, but after a while, you realize it's just part of the culture. It's a tradition that has been around for centuries, and while some wish it would fade away, it's still deeply rooted in everyday life. Cultural life in Myanmar also revolves around community. Unlike in many places where people live behind closed doors, here neighbors are constantly in and out of each other's houses. Social life spills out into the streets, whether it's sharing food, chatting in tea shops, or celebrating festivals. Kids play football in the alleyways, families gather outdoors in the evenings, and communities come together for religious events. The sense of togetherness is strong, and it gives you the feeling that no one is ever truly alone here. Festivals add another layer to the cultural experience. Water festivals, temple fairs, and religious celebrations bring entire towns together. During Thingyan, the Burmese New Year Water Festival, people throw water on each other for days straight. It's basically a nationwide water fight, and nobody is safe. Businessmen, monks, children, even tourists, they all get drenched. It's fun, chaotic, and somehow reflects the playful spirit of the people. The respect for tradition is also clear in daily life. Whether it's removing shoes before entering a home or temple, showing respect to elders, or even the way people sit on the floor during meals, there is a strong sense of manners and customs that keep society grounded. And yet, this tradition doesn't make people stiff. Instead, it adds to their charm. You'll often find yourself smiling because of the small gestures that make interactions so human. Like a shopkeeper laughing as they explain something to you with gestures, or a child waving shyly before running away giggling. What strikes you most, however, is the balance between simplicity and happiness. Life here isn't about expensive cars, giant malls, or flashy lifestyles. People find joy in family, in food, in festivals, and in faith. They may not have what the world calls wealth, but they are rich in relationships and kindness. For a traveler, that's what leaves the deepest mark. You come expecting temples and cheap food, but you leave remembering faces and conversations. Myanmar's people are its greatest treasure. Their hospitality doesn't feel forced, and their warmth doesn't feel transactional. They welcome you as a guest, but treat you like a friend. And when you leave, it has those human connections that stay with you more than the photos of golden pagodas or sunsets. So yes, Myanmar has stunning landscapes, historic temples, and delicious food. But what truly makes it unforgettable is the culture that lives through its people. A culture where kindness is currency, We're amongst blessed not just your soul, but sometimes your internet connection. And where a stranger's smile can make you feel at home, even if you're thousands of miles away. If there's one thing you cannot miss in Myanmar, it's the food. Street food isn't just an option here, it's an obsession. Every corner has a small stall, every alley has a grill, and every evening the streets fill with the smell of frying, steaming, and boiling. Food is the heartbeat of daily life, and you quickly learn that eating here isn't just about filling your stomach. It is about being part of the culture. The national dish, mohinga, is a perfect place to start. It's a fish-based noodle soup usually eaten for breakfast, though locals will happily eat it any time of the day. Bowls of steaming mohinga are sold on almost every street, costing less than $1. It comes with crispy fritters, herbs, and a rich broth that somehow feels both light and hearty. For many Burmese people, mohinga isn't just food, it's comfort. If you ask someone what Myanmar tastes like, the answer will almost always be mohinga. Then there's the jade trade, a world that feels like something out of a movie. Myanmar has some of the richest jade deposits in the world, and this trade is both glamorous and shadowy. On the surface, you'll see shiny jade jewelry in markets, bracelets and pendants being sold to tourists for a few dollars. But behind that is a billion-dollar industry tied to powerful groups, corruption, and sometimes even smuggling. The most prized jade, known as imperial jade, can sell for shocking amounts in China and beyond. Of course, most tourists will never see the real heart of this business that happens far away from the everyday markets. Still, knowing that the little green bracelet you see for $10 has roots in an empire worth billions gives you a taste of just how layered Myanmar really is. Cultural traditions also have their own hidden details. Take the naka, the yellowish paste made from ground bark. Tourists see it on people's faces and think it as just for decoration or maybe sunscreen. But locals will tell you it's much more than that. It's beauty, protection, and identity all in one. Mothers pass it down to their daughters, and for many, wearing thanaka is a sign of pride. You'll even find entire rituals built around applying it before festivals or special days. And while tourists might chuckle at the idea of walking around with bark paste on their cheeks, in Myanmar it's as normal as wearing perfume or makeup in other countries. Another part of local life that visitors rarely notice is the secret nightlife. On the surface, Myanmar seems very quiet once. The sun sets, tea shops close, families head home, and streets grow dark. But hidden away inside alleys and certain neighborhoods, there are bars, karaoke lounges, and clubs where locals go to relax, dance, and sometimes break the rules. Alcohol is cheap and music is loud. But these places don't advertise themselves. You need to know someone who knows someone. Step inside, and suddenly you're in a completely different world. Neon lights, laughter, and a side of Myanmar that feels modern and rebellious. It's not the kind of nightlife you find in Bangkok or Manila, but it's there, and it's alive. Daily life under currency restrictions also hides its own surprises. Since banking isn't always reliable, people often rely on trust systems. A shopkeeper might let you pay later, or a neighbor will lend you money without paperwork. Entire communities run on trust. And while it might sound risky, it works because social ties here are so strong. If someone doesn't pay, the whole neighborhood will know, and reputation matters more than contracts. It's a reminder that sometimes human connection is stronger than any banking system. Of course, not all secrets are glamorous. Some are just everyday quirks that leave you shaking your head. For example, electricity blackouts are common. You might be in the middle of dinner or a shower when suddenly the power goes out. Locals don't panic, they just grab candles, laugh it off, and continue as if nothing happened. For a visitor, it's frustrating at first, but then you realize it's simply part of life here. In some ways, it even adds to the charm. You sit in the dark, sipping tea, talking with people instead of staring at your phone. And then there are the unspoken rules. For instance, politics is a delicate subject. Locals often lower their voices when discussing it, even if they're in a private space. Foreigners might not notice this at first, but it's a quiet reminder of the unseen boundaries that shape daily life. You learn to respect those boundaries quickly, even with all these quirks. What stands out most is how people adapt. Whether it's dealing with cash shortages, power cuts, or quiet rules, the Burmese people carry on with humor and resilience. They laugh when the ATM is empty. They share food when someone's short on cash, and they turn a blackout into a mini gathering. For them, these hidden challenges are not obstacles, they're just life. But some secrets are harder to explain, the kind that make you lean in closer when someone whispers them. During my time in Myanmar, I stumbled across one particular thing I wasn't supposed to film. It was unusual, surprising, and it showed me a side of the country that most outsiders will never witness. I can't share all of it just yet, but let us just say it changed the way I thought about Myanmar's hidden world. And that's the thing about Myanmar. For every pagoda you photograph, for every bowl of mohinga you eat, there's another layer waiting just out of sight. Some of it is beautiful, some of it is difficult, and some of it is kept deliberately hidden. But all of it makes this country far more complex and far more fascinating than you'd ever expect. When people think of Myanmar, dating and relationships aren't usually the first things that come to mind. But just like food, culture, and daily life, love and relationships here have their own rules, traditions, and hidden layers. What makes it fascinating is the balance between old traditions and modern changes. On one hand, there are deep cultural expectations about marriage, family, and roles of men and women. On the other, young people in the cities are using dating apps, hanging out at tea shops, and carving their own path. The role of women in Myanmar is interesting. Traditionally, women are seen as caretakers, mothers, and family builders. Respect for mothers is especially high there, as even a saying that the mother is the Buddha at home. Women are expected to be modest and maintain dignity, but at the same time, they're also powerful within the family structure. In many households, women manage the finances, make key decisions, and are the backbone of daily life. It is a quiet form of influence that often surprises outsiders who assume women have less authority here. In cities like Yangon and Mandalay, you see more modern attitudes. Women work in offices, run businesses, and are part of professional life. Younger women dress in both traditional longi, a type of sarong, and modern jeans or skirts, depending on where they are. But in rural areas, traditions hold stronger. Relationships there are often influenced by family arrangements, community approval, and social expectations. Dating in a village isn't about swiping right on an app, it's about whether your neighbors approve of who you're talking to. And trust me, in a place where gossip spreads faster than internet signals, everyone knows everyone's business. That's what makes dating apps in Myanmar so funny. Yes, they exist, and yes, young people use them, especially in bigger cities. But the real matchmaking often happens through neighbors, relatives, or just curious aunties who keep an eye on who you walk home with. It is the only place I've been where a rumor from your neighbor can be more powerful than a dating profile. You might get matched with someone online, but if your street doesn't approve, good luck. There's also a sharp contrast between how relationships are viewed publicly and privately. In public, people are usually very conservative. You won't often see couples holding hands or showing affection openly, especially outside the major cities. A simple hug or kiss in public can raise eyebrows, but behind closed doors or in private spaces, things can be more relaxed. Young couples find ways to spend time together discreetly, whether it's in cafes, parks, or quiet corners of the city. It's almost like there are two sets of rules, one for what society allows you to show, and another for what really happens in private. This creates what I'd call hidden liberal pockets in certain bars, nightclubs, or university circles. You'll find young people who are more open about relationships, dating, and even partying. They listen to pop music, dance, and talk about love the same way young people do anywhere else in the world. But this side of life is often hidden from outsiders and even from older generations. It's like a secret double life, traditional on the surface, modern underneath. The shocking truth is how carefully people balance this. It's not easy. A student might wear a longi to please her parents during the day, but switch to jeans and meet her friends at a club at night. A young couple might act like just friends in front of family, but be dating seriously in private. The dance between tradition and modernity is constant, and everyone learns how to play both sides. But what happens if you get caught breaking the rules? Well, that's where things get tricky. In conservative areas, being seen with someone of the opposite sex late at night can lead to gossip, scolding from elders, or even trouble with parents. A young man might suddenly find that his innocent walk with a girl has turned into a full-blown community discussion. And trust me, gossip in a Burmese neighborhood is no joke. People can spin an entire love story from seeing you share one cup of tea. Still, despite the rules and the risks, love finds a way. Couples adapt, families negotiate, and communities learn to look the other way sometimes. Marriage is still a huge milestone, and many people marry young. But more and more, young Burmese are pushing for love marriages rather than arranged ones. They want to choose their own partners even if that means challenging some expectations. Social life in Myanmar also reflects this mix of tradition and modernity. For many, socializing happens in tea shops or family gatherings, where conversations are lively and everyone knows everyone. In cities, nightlife is slowly growing, with karaoke bars and clubs where young people can relax and meet others. But even then, there's always a sense that someone is watching, and that balance between freedom and restraint never fully disappears. In the end, dating and relationships in Myanmar show the same contradiction that runs through the whole country. On the surface, it looks conservative, almost frozen in older customs. But underneath, there's movement, change, and a quiet rebellion against the rules. It may not look like dating life in Bangkok or Manila, but it has its own charm. It's cautious, it's creative, and it's full of stories that never make it into guidebooks. So yes, dating apps exist, but the real matchmaking still happens through neighbors gossiping about you. Public affection may be rare, but private romance is alive and well. Tradition may still be strong, but hidden liberal pockets keep growing. And if you're ever caught breaking the rules, well, let's just say the entire street might know before you even make it home. Living in Myanmar as an expat or digital nomad is a very different story compared to visiting as a tourist. On the surface, life looks cheap, and simple $500 a month really can cover your basic needs. But once you dig into the details, you realize that daily life here has its own set of challenges, quirks, and even risks. For some, these challenges make it exciting. For others, it can feel frustrating. Either way, it's an experience you'll never forget. The first hurdle most expats and digital nomads face is the internet. Let's just say it's not Myanmar's strongest point. Wi-Fi can be painfully slow, connections are unstable, and outages are common. Sometimes, you wait minutes for a single page to load. If you're used to fast fiber internet in other countries, this feels like torture. Wi-Fi speed tests here should come with a prayer option because sometimes, divine intervention feels faster than the signal. For people working online, this can make or break their day. That's why many digital workers rely on multiple SIM cards and mobile data as backups. Because one provider might go down while another keeps working. Having at least two options is almost a survival skill. Then there's censorship and restrictions. Certain websites and platforms are blocked, which means VPNs are a must. A good VPN isn't just helpful, it's essential. Without it, you'll often hit walls online, unable to access tools or apps you depend on for work. This adds an extra layer of planning for digital nomads, who have to factor in the cost of VPN subscriptions and the patience to deal with slower speeds. Some expats joke that in Myanmar, the three things you can't live without are rice, tea, and a VPN. Despite these issues, expats still manage to make it work. You'll find English teachers, NGO workers, freelancers, and business owners who call Myanmar home, at least for a while. They often talk about the same thing. The low cost of living is worth the trade-offs. For under $500 a month, you can rent a comfortable apartment, eat out daily, and have money left for transport and entertainment. In cities like Yangon, some expats even live in serviced apartments with air conditioning and cleaning services, all while still spending less than what they pay for a studio back home. For digital nomads, the lifestyle here requires creativity. Internet cafes are everywhere, and while they're not glamorous, they provide steady connections at very low prices. Many expats also turn tea shops into unofficial co-working spaces, buying endless cups of tea while typing away on their laptops. It's not as polished as a co-working hub in Thailand or Bali, but it has its own charm. Plus, it keeps you close to the local community instead of being tucked away in expat-only zones. Daily life itself is affordable and often stress-free once you get used to the rhythm. Street food is everywhere, transport is cheap, and basic services like laundry or haircuts cost next to nothing. Lifestyle hacks are easy to pick up. For example, buying fresh produce at local markets is far cheaper than going to supermarkets. Cooking at home can be done on a tiny budget, but eating out is often just as cheap and saves you the hassle. Taking motorbike taxis instead of regular taxis can cut down costs. and learning a few Burmese phrases can earn you better deals with locals. For many expats, blending in just a little goes a long way in keeping expenses low. But not everything is smooth sailing. Healthcare is one area where many expats prefer to be cautious. Local clinics are cheap but not always well equipped. So many people keep extra savings aside for emergencies, or even travel to Thailand if something serious happens. That is an added cost that doesn't show up in the $500 budget, but becomes important for long-term living. Social life for expats and digital nomads is another interesting mix. There are small communities in cities where foreigners gather, sometimes in bars, sometimes at cultural events, and often just through word of mouth. You'll find yourself meeting people from all over the world who are here for different reasons, some for work, some for adventure, some for love, and others because Myanmar is one of the last places that feels untouched compared to its neighbors. Unlike Thailand or Vietnam, Myanmar doesn't have huge expat hubs, so the community feels smaller and tighter. That can be a good thing. You quickly make friends, but it also means your circle may be limited. Another challenge is adjusting to the unexpected. Things don't always work on schedule. Trains run late, power cuts happen, ATMs are empty, and internet signals vanish without warning. Expats often learn to take this with humor. When the lights go out, you grab a candle. When the internet dies, you take a tea break. The people who thrive here are those who adapt quickly and see these hiccups as part of the experience rather than constant headaches. Still, there's always an undercurrent of risk. Myanmar has gone through political and social changes in recent years, and these shifts can sometimes affect expats directly. While many areas remain safe for daily living, sudden changes in rules or restrictions can catch you off guard. That is why most long-term expats recommend keeping a plan B, whether it is an extra stash of cash, a backup SIM card, or even a backup plan for leaving the country if needed. It's not something most travelers think about, but here, it becomes part of your routine. At the end of the day, living in Myanmar as an expat or digital nomad is a balance. On one side, you have cheap living, rich culture, and an authentic daily experience you won't find in more touristy countries. On the other side, you deal with slow Wi-Fi, blackouts, and rules that don't always make sense. For some, it's too much. For others, it's exactly what makes Myanmar so unique. But here's where it gets risky. Life here can change suddenly, and what feels comfortable today can feel uncertain tomorrow. That unpredictability is part of the package, and whether you see it as a burden or as an adventure depends entirely on you. Talking about Myanmar without mentioning its political side would be like describing a meal without mentioning the spices. It's there, you feel it, and it shapes everyday life even if you don't want to talk about it too much. To be clear, we're not diving into politics itself, but rather the way it affects daily reality for locals and visitors. These challenges are part of what makes Myanmar so complex, and understanding them helps explain why life here feels both beautiful and fragile at the same time. One of the biggest challenges is media restrictions. In many countries, you can post whatever you want online, complain about the government, or share memes without a second thought. In Myanmar, that freedom isn't guaranteed. Certain topics are sensitive, and speaking to openly can sometimes bring unwanted attention. Even on social media, people are cautious. Posting memes here can sometimes get you more trouble than bad karaoke. It sounds funny, but its true humor can carry risks depending on the subject. That's why many people keep their opinions to private conversations, whispered jokes, or quiet exchanges in tea shops rather than blasting them online. Another reality is travel restrictions in certain regions. While most major cities and tourist sites are open, some parts of the country require special permits for foreigners. This isn't just about protecting tourists, it is also because some areas are sensitive due to local conflicts or cultural reasons. For a traveler, this means you can't always go wherever you want, even if the map makes it look close by. A trip to a rural region might involve paperwork, waiting for approval, or sometimes being told no altogether. It is a reminder that the country is still dealing with complexities outsiders don't always see. Daily life under these conditions can feel unusual for visitors who are used to open access. Imagine wanting to take a bus to a neighboring town, only to find out you need a permit just to enter. Or imagine scrolling on your phone and realizing half the websites you normally use are suddenly blocked. These things don't stop life, but they make it more complicated. Locals are used to it, they adapt, they work around restrictions, and they carry on with life. For expats or tourists, it takes a little time to get used to. This is where resilience shows up most clearly. Burmese people know how to handle challenges with a mix of patience and humor. They laugh off internet blackouts, find creative ways around restrictions, and lean on community support when rules feel too heavy. What might feel frustrating to an outsider is just part of life for those who grew up here. It's this ability to keep smiling in difficult circumstances that makes Myanmar so inspiring. But there's no denying the weight of it all. Life here really is both beautiful and fragile. You can be walking past golden pagodas that glow in the sunlight, enjoying the hospitality of strangers who treat you like family, and then suddenly you're reminded that freedom is limited. Rules are strict, and challenges are everywhere. That mix of joy and caution is hard to describe. It as like holding a flower in one hand and a stone in the other. For travelers, the advice is usually simple: be respectful, don't push boundaries, and pay attention to how locals behave. If people lower their voices when a topic comes up, take the hint. If someone says it's better not to film in a certain area, trust them. It's not about being afraid, it's about being aware. In a place where rules can shift quickly, awareness becomes your best safety net. Even something as small as internet access reflects these realities. Certain sites or platforms may suddenly disappear, forcing people to use VPNs for digital nomads. This can feel frustrating for locals. It's just another reminder of the limits they live with every day. Yet, despite these barriers, you'll still see people smiling at tea shops, families celebrating festivals, and kids laughing in the streets. That balance between restriction and joy defines Myanmar in ways that statistics never could. It's also worth noting that while some parts of daily life are restricted, others are incredibly free. Neighbors look out for each other, communities celebrate together, and kindness flows naturally. This balance of limits and freedoms creates a unique atmosphere. You may feel restricted online, but when you step outside, you feel the openness of human connection. For foreigners living here long-term, these challenges often become normal. At first, the rules feel heavy. You wonder why you can't visit certain areas, why internet speeds drop, or why people are cautious with what they say. But after some time, you learn to appreciate the resilience and adaptability of the people. You stop seeing it as just restriction and start seeing it as a kind of survival skill, a way of making the most out of less than perfect circumstances. In the end, Myanmar's reality is not something to fear, but something to respect. It reminds you that life can be fragile, but also deeply meaningful. You realize that even in a place where rules are strict and freedoms are limited, joy still finds a way to exist. Festivals still fill the streets with laughter, children still play in the rain, and neighbors still gather at tea shops for hours. That's the beauty of Myanmar. It teaches you that even in difficult situations, the human spirit finds ways to shine. So yes, there are restrictions. Yes, there are challenges, but they don't erase the warmth of the people, the beauty of the culture, or the richness of daily life. They simply remind you that Myanmar is not simple, it's complex, fragile, and resilient all at once. And for anyone who spends time here, that lesson stays long after you leave. If there's one thing Myanmar knows how to do, it's celebrate. Festivals here aren't just events on a calendar, they raise collective moments of joy that take over entire towns, cities, and sometimes the whole country. The most famous of them all is Thingyan, the Burmese New Year, which is celebrated with a nationwide water festival. Thingyan is basically Myanmar's version of a countrywide water gun fight with no one safe. For several days, people line the streets with buckets, hoses, and water cannons, drenching everyone who passes by. Strangers splash each other, kids aim at passing cars, and even police officers end up soaked. It doesn't matter who you are during Thingyan, you're a target. The streets turn into rivers, music blasts from loudspeakers, and laughter fills the air. It's not just fun, it's cleansing. The water is symbolic, washing away the bad from the old year and starting the new one fresh. And here's the best part, joining in doesn't cost much at all. A few cents for snacks, maybe a cheap raincoat if you're smart, and that's it. You don't need an expensive ticket or a special pass. You just step outside, and you're part of the biggest street party in the country. And you won't believe how cheap it is to join. This kind of joy is practically free. Beyond Thingyan, religion plays a massive role in everyday life. With around 90% of the population practicing Buddhism, ceremonies, rituals, and traditions shape the rhythm of the country. From small village temples to grand golden pagodas, you'll always find people making offerings, lighting candles, or walking slowly around shrines. For many Burmese, visiting the temple isn't a once-in-a-while occasion, it's woven into daily or weekly life. Ceremonies can be simple, like families offering food to monks in the morning, or grand, like temple festivals where entire communities come together. One of the most touching traditions is the ordination of novice monks. Boys as young as 8 temporarily join monasteries, shave their heads, and wear saffron robes. It's a rite of passage that many families take pride in. Watching these ceremonies shows how deeply religion connects generations here. But religion in Myanmar isn't just about rituals, it's also about togetherness. During Buddhist holidays, temples overflow with families praying, chanting, and sharing food. People don't just think of themselves. They cook extra, bring offerings, and give freely for visitors. This generosity feels overwhelming at times. You're not just an observer, you're often invited to join, share a meal, or take part in a ritual, even if you don't understand all the details. What stands out is the collective joy. Festivals here aren't quiet affairs. They're loud, colorful, and full of life. Music, laughter, food stalls, and endless smiles define these moments. Even if you come as a stranger, you're pulled into the energy. And unlike festivals elsewhere, where prices skyrocket, here you can eat, dance, and celebrate without breaking your budget. Religion and festivals together reveal one of Myanmar's biggest secrets. Joy isn't bought here, it is shared. Whether it's the chaos of Thingyan or the calm of a temple chant, these moments show how happiness grows stronger when people experience it together. Whenever people talk about traveling to Myanmar, one of the first questions is always about safety. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? The truth lies somewhere in between, just like everything else in this country. On the surface, Myanmar is generally safe for tourists. Violent crime against foreigners is rare, and in most places, people go out of their way to make sure you feel welcome. But that doesn't mean there are no risks. For tourists, the most common issues aren't big dangers but small scams. Taxi drivers who charge a little extra, shops that raise prices when they see foreigners, or tour operators who promise more than they deliver. Compared to scams in other parts of Asia, Myanmar's are mild, but they still exist. It's more about paying double for a ride than losing your wallet. Once you get used to bargaining, you avoid most of these problems. Another hidden risk is food safety. Street food is delicious, cheap, and tempting, but sometimes it's cooked in less than perfect conditions. The biggest danger is eating too much fried street food and then trying to walk afterward. Trust me, greasy samosas and long hot walks don't mix well. For most visitors, the worst you'll face is a mild stomach upset, but it's worth being cautious with water and ice. Stick to bottled water, and you'll be fine. Perception versus reality is another interesting point. To outsiders, Myanmar might sound intimidating because of its political situation or news headlines. But when you're actually here, daily life feels calm, ordinary, even peaceful. Families shop at markets, kids run through the streets, neighbors gather for tea. The reality on the ground often feels much safer than what you imagined before coming. The contrast between foreign perception and local reality is one of the reasons so many travelers leave with positive stories. That being said, there are moments of real caution. Some areas are not open to tourists, especially regions where conflicts exist. These are usually well marked, and travel agencies or locals will warn you if you shouldn't go somewhere. Respecting those warnings is key. Wandering into restricted zones isn't just against the rules, it can put you in uncomfortable or unsafe situations. Day-to-day safety in cities is more about common sense. Watch your belongings in crowded places. Don't flash expensive gadgets, and be mindful at night. But overall, walking around Yangon or Mandalay feels safer than walking in many major cities in the West. The crime rate is low, and people are often more curious about you than threatening. Still, I'd be lying if I said there weren't moments when I felt uneasy. There was one time I genuinely felt unsafe. It wasn't about crime, but about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll share that story later, but let's just say it reminded me that while Myanmar is welcoming, it's also unpredictable. That unpredictability is part of its charm and its challenge. Another risk is transportation. Roads can be rough, buses old, and traffic chaotic. Crossing the street sometimes feels like a survival skill, with cars, buses, and motorbikes moving in every direction at once. But the funny thing is, accidents are less common than you'd think, because everyone is used to this system. It's organized chaos, but it works most of the time. One more hidden danger is healthcare. Hospitals exist, but facilities are limited compared to neighboring countries like Thailand. For small issues, local clinics are fine, but for anything serious, many expats travel to Bangkok. That means if you're staying long-term, it's smart to keep extra savings for emergencies. Despite these risks, most visitors leave Myanmar with positive stories. They talk about the kindness of locals, the beauty of temples, and the surprise of how safe they felt compared to their fears. That's the irony. What looks risky from afar often feels secure up close. So yes, Myanmar has risks. Scams, food safety, transport chaos, and limited healthcare are all real. But compared to the warmth of the people and the richness of the culture, these risks feel small. It is not a dangerous country for most travelers. It is a place where the main danger is falling in love with the lifestyle and not wanting to leave. But still, remember that one moment I mentioned? The one where I felt truly unsafe? Hold on to that thought because we'll come back to it soon. By now, you've heard bits and pieces of how far money goes in Myanmar. But let's put it all together and paint the full picture. What can $500 actually buy you in this country? The short answer, more than you'd expect. The long answer, enough to live comfortably, eat well, and even enjoy a lifestyle that feels better than what many people back home get for 10 times the price. First, let's start with the basics: housing. With $150 to $250 a month, you can rent a clean, local apartment with plenty of space. For that price, you might get a living room, bedroom, and sometimes even a small balcony. If you're willing to spend a little more, you can have air conditioning, better furniture, or a spot closer to the city center. Compare that to New York, where $500 might only cover 1 week of rent in a tiny room with a view of a brick wall. And suddenly Myanmar feels like a bargain. For $500 here, you don't just get a roof, you get comfort. Next, food. This is where things get fun. At $2 to $3 per meal, you can eat out every single day without worrying about blowing your budget. We're talking rice with curries, noodle soups, fried snacks, tea, and even desserts. Breakfast might be mohinga for less than $1. Lunch could be a plate of rice and chicken curry for $2, and dinner might include skewers, samosas, and milk tea for another $3. By the end of the day, you've spent $6 at most, and you're stuffed. For an entire month, that adds up to around $180, and that's if you're eating out every day. If you mix in cooking at home or buying groceries from the market, you'll spend even less. It's no exaggeration to say that food here is not only affordable, it's generous. Then comes transportation. Getting around Myanmar is cheap enough that you'll almost never worry about it. A taxi ride across Yangon costs just a few dollars, and motorbike taxis in Mandalay are even cheaper, often less than $1 for short rides. Buses cost cents. Grab, the ride-hailing app, is widely used, and you can crisscross the city for the same price as a cup of coffee back in the West. To put it another way, in New York, $500 buys you stress. In Myanmar, it buys you peace and curry and more than enough taxis to get around town in comfort. Entertainment and lifestyle also fit into the $500 budget easily. Internet cafes cost almost nothing, bars and clubs serve $1 beers, and tea shops keep you fed and social for under $1 per visit. Want a massage? Around $6 to $10 for a full hour. Haircuts, laundry, and small services are equally affordable. These aren't luxuries here, they're part of daily life. For $500, you don't just cover your essentials, you get the extras that make life enjoyable. So what does this look like in practice? Let us imagine you're living in Yangon with $500. You paid $100 for your apartment. That leaves $300. You spend around $180 on food, leaving $120. Out of that, maybe $40 goes to transport, $30 to entertainment, and $50 to extras like laundry, internet, or the occasional night out. You still have a small cushion left over. You're not scraping by, you're living like a middle-class local, with the ability to eat out, travel comfortably, and enjoy yourself. This is where Myanmar stands out compared to its neighbors. In Thailand, especially in Bangkok, most people agree you need at least $800 to $1,000 for a comfortable lifestyle. Vietnam is cheaper, but still around $600 to $700 for a decent standard of living in Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City. In the Philippines, $500 might get you by in rural areas, but in Manila or Cebu it disappears quickly. Myanmar is one of the few places left where $500 genuinely gives you breathing room. It's not survival, it's living well. Of course, $500 here doesn't make you rich. You won't be renting penthouses or throwing money around in luxury shops. But compared to the stress of trying to survive in expensive cities, $500 here feels almost magical. You're not counting every coin. You're not choosing between rent and groceries. You're free to sit in a tea shop for hours, hop into a taxi without guilt, and order that extra plate of samosas just because you can. And that kind of financial freedom, even on a small budget, is rare these days. Another hidden advantage is that $500 gives you access to experiences, not just things. You can take day trips to nearby towns, visit temples, or join festivals like Thingyan without worrying about costs. You can interact with locals, share meals, and be part of the culture instead of just observing it from afar. That kind of immersion doesn't require thousands of dollars, it requires being in a place where life itself is affordable. But it is important to say this, living on $500 in Myanmar doesn't mean life is perfect. There are trade-offs. Internet is slow, healthcare is limited, and some comforts you take for granted elsewhere might not exist here. What $500 buys is peace of mind in some areas, but not total security. You won't feel poor, but you also won't feel like a king. It's a balance between having enough to live comfortably and learning to live without certain luxuries. At the end of the day, the real magic of $500 in Myanmar isn't in the numbers, it's in how it feels. You feel less stressed, less rushed, and less trapped by money. You realize you don't need to be wealthy to live well. For many visitors, that realization is life-changing. So yes, $500 in New York buys you stress, but in Myanmar it buys you peace, curry, tea, transport, and enough freedom to actually enjoy life. For once, you feel like money isn't controlling you, you're controlling it. But here's the twist. For all that $500 can buy here, comfort, food, fun, and freedom, there's one thing it can't buy. And that's where Myanmar's story takes a turn. As we reach the end of this journey through Myanmar, one thing becomes clear. This country is full of contradictions. On one side, you see poverty, old traditions, and limits that make daily life difficult. On the other side, you find beauty so rich it leaves you speechless. People so kind it feels priceless, and a lifestyle so affordable it almost feels unreal. Myanmar is proof that life doesn't need to be polished or perfect to be meaningful. Sometimes, simplicity carries more weight than luxury. Think back to everything we've seen. Golden pagodas shining under the sun. Tea shops buzzing with laughter and gossip. Meals costing less than $2 but leaving you so full you can barely move. Neighbors sharing food, festivals filling the streets with water fights and music, and monks walking calmly through chaos. None of this has a price tag, yet it's what makes the country unforgettable. So now you know $500 here isn't survival, it's transformation. It's the difference between constantly counting every penny and actually living your life. It gives you food, shelter, transport, and comfort, but it also buys you something deeper: time, freedom, and peace of mind. That's what makes Myanmar stand out compared to the rest of Asia. Of course, it's not perfect. There are power cuts, currency issues, and restrictions that remind you life here is fragile. You may not get fast internet, smooth roads, or top-class hospitals, but you get something else: human connection, cultural richness, and the chance to live at a pace that feels more human than mechanical. In a world that keeps rushing forward, Myanmar somehow slows you down, making you notice the little things that money can't buy. And that's the greatest lesson this place teaches. Wealth isn't always about money. A family sharing their meal with you when they barely have enough for themselves, that's wealth. A festival where laughter drowns out every worry, that's wealth. A stranger treating you like a friend without asking for anything in return, that's wealth. For many people, Myanmar is not just another destination. It's a mirror. It makes you question what you really need to live a good life. Do you need more gadgets, more clothes, and more expensive coffee? Or do you need good food, meaningful connections, and a sense of peace? Here, $500 answers that question more clearly than any bank account balance could. So here is my challenge to you. If you had just $500 to live anywhere in Asia, would you spend it here, or do you think another country gives you more freedom? Tell me your answer in the comments, because the most surprising reply might be the country we cover next. Maybe you'll say Thailand with its beaches, or Vietnam with its coffee culture, or the Philippines with its island lifestyle. Or maybe, after hearing about the temples of Bagan, the chaos of Yangon, and the joy of Thingyan, you'll say Myanmar is the place where $500 stretches the farthest, not just in money, but in meaning. Whatever your answer, it's worth thinking about, because this isn't just a question about Myanmar, it's a question about what matters to you. What would you choose if money was no longer the biggest barrier? Where would you go if $500 wasn't survival money, but the start of something richer? Myanmar shows us that sometimes the cheapest life can feel the richest. It shows us that even in a fragile place, beauty thrives. And it reminds us that culture, kindness, and community can never be priced. So, if you had $500 in your pocket and one choice to make, where would you live? Drop your answer below, I promise. The best comments will shape what comes next. Because maybe the next story isn't just about Myanmar. Maybe it's about your idea of paradise.